I kept my brother's secret for 8 months. I told myself I was protecting my family. I told myself my sister-in-law was fragile, that the timing was wrong, that things might work themselves out. I told myself a lot of things in those 8 months. None of them were true. The truth was simpler and uglier than any excuse I made. I kept the secret because telling it would have cost me something. And I valued my own comfort more than my brother's marriage. My name is not important. What matters is that I am the older brother. The one who was supposed to know better. My brother, whose name is Miles, married his wife Stella 6 years ago in a small ceremony in Asheville, North Carolina. I was his best man. I stood beside him at the altar and watched him say his vows, with the kind of certainty that makes you believe love is something permanent. Stella cried when she said hers. Her maid of honor cried. Our mother cried. I did not cry, because I was trying to hold it together for my brother, but I felt something watching them. Something close to awe, like witnessing the beginning of something that deserved to last. Miles and Stella had a daughter together. Her name is Olive. She was 3 years old when everything fell apart. I need to tell you what I did before I tell you what happened to my brother. Because this is not his story to carry alone. It is mine too. About 2 years into their marriage, Miles went through what I only describe as a slow unraveling. Nothing dramatic. No single event. He had taken on a second job to help pay down debt from a medical bill Stella had accumulated before they met. He was tired in a way that went beyond sleep. He stopped coming to Sunday dinners. He stopped returning calls as quickly. When we did see each other, he seemed like a man running slightly behind himself. Always one step short of where he needed to be. That was when my friend Kyle started spending more time around our family. Kyle had been my friend since college. We had grown up in different states, but ended up at the same university in Tennessee and stayed close afterward. He was charming in that effortless way that makes certain people magnetic, and he had always been good at finding his way into situations where he was welcome. When Miles and Stella moved back to our hometown of Knoxville after their wedding, Kyle was already there. He had taken a job at a logistics company and rented an apartment downtown, and because I was the common thread, he became part of the extended circle. I did not notice it happening the way I should have. At first it was just that Kyle mentioned Stella in conversation more than felt natural. She had recommended a restaurant. She had texted him about a movie. Small things. Things that individually meant nothing, and together meant everything. I noticed, but I filed each one under coincidence the way people file things they do not want to examine. Then one evening in November, I went to return a set of jumper cables I had borrowed from Miles. He was working the closing shift at the second job. I knocked on his front door, and Stella answered, and Kyle was sitting at their kitchen table with a cup of coffee like he lived there. He looked up. She looked at me. For a half second. Neither of them moved the way people move when they have nothing to hide. I said I was just dropping something off. I left within 2 minutes. I sat in my truck in their driveway for a moment before I pulled out, staring at nothing, my hands on the steering wheel. Then I drove home and did not call Miles. I told myself I had not actually seen anything. The next week I called Kyle. He denied it immediately. Before I had even finished asking the question, he said they were just friends, that Miles knew he came by sometimes, that I was reading too much into things. He said it with such ease that I almost believed him. Kyle had always been good at certainty. That was part of what made him likable. He never seemed unsure of himself. Looking back now, I understand that is not a character strength, it is a warning. I did not call Miles. Instead, I watched. Not obviously, but I paid attention in ways I had not before. I noticed that Stella seemed lighter when Kyle's name came up. I noticed that Miles seemed heavier in ways he could not name. I noticed that when the three of us were together, there were silences that had a shape to them. A particular angle of avoidance. I noticed these things and I kept filing them away. 8 months is a long time to know something is wrong and do nothing. The reason I finally told Miles had nothing to do with bravery or integrity. It happened because Stella's younger sister Petra pulled me aside at a birthday party for Olive and asked me quietly whether I knew what was going on between Stella and my friend. Her voice was low, and her face was tight, with the kind of discomfort that only comes from carrying information you did not want. I realized then that other people knew. That the window of private knowledge had already closed. That Miles was the only one who did not know, and he was going to find out. And when he did, the first question he would ask was whether I had known too. I called him the next morning. I drove to his house. He was home alone. Olive was at Stella's mother's place. I sat across from him at the same kitchen table where I had seen Kyle and told my brother the things I had been telling myself were not mine to tell. Miles listened. He did not interrupt. When I finished, he sat very still for a moment. Then he asked how long I had known. I told him. He looked at me the way you look at something you thought was solid and have just discovered is hollow. Not with anger, with recalibration. Like he was updating something in his understanding of the world, and the update included me. He said, 8 months. Not a question, just the number, sitting there between us. I said I was sorry. I said I had not known how to tell him. I said I had wanted to be sure. I said all the things that people say when they have done something they cannot undo, and are hoping explanation will soften it. Miles stood up and walked to the window. He stood there for a long time without saying anything. Then he said, "You were my brother first. You were my brother before Kyle was ever your friend." I did not have an answer for that. He asked me to leave. I left. What happened over the next 3 months was something I watched from the outside. The way you watch a fire from a distance, and know there is nothing you can do but let it burn. Miles confronted Stella. She did not deny it. She cried and said she had not meant for it to happen and that she loved Miles, and that she had ended it. Miles asked how long. She told him. It had been longer than I had known. It had started before I even noticed anything. The visit in November had not been the beginning. It had been the middle. Miles filed for divorce 6 weeks after our conversation. He hired a family law attorney in Knoxville and moved into a one-bedroom apartment in a quiet part of town near a park. He fought for joint custody of Olive and got it. He stopped drinking the 2 beers he used to have on weeknights. He started running in the mornings. Small adjustments. The kind people make when they are rebuilding from the inside out. He also stopped talking to me, not all at once. It was more like a gradual dimming. Return texts became shorter. Phone calls became less frequent. When we did see each other at family events, he was polite in that careful, controlled way that hurts more than anger. Because it means the person has decided. You are not worth the energy of being angry at anymore. I told myself he just needed time. Our mother told me to give him space. She said Miles had a lot to process and that he would come around. She said it the way she always said difficult things, gently. With confidence she did not entirely feel. I think she believed it. I am not sure I did. Kyle, for his part, disappeared almost immediately. He transferred to a company branch in Phoenix and was gone within 2 months of everything coming out. He sent me one text message that said, "Sorry man, things got complicated." I did not respond. I have not spoken to him since. There is a version of this story where I tell you I have no anger toward Kyle. That version would be dishonest. But the anger I have toward Kyle is simpler and smaller than the grief I carry about my brother. Kyle was never supposed to be the person I trusted most. Miles was. About a year after the divorce was finalized. My sister-in-law on my wife's side mentioned that she had run into Miles at a farmer's market. She said he had seemed well. She said he had been with Olive, and that Olive was getting big, and that she had looked happy. I did not know that small piece of information would sit with me the way it did. I replayed it for days. Olive looked happy. Miles had seemed well. From across a city neither of them had left, and without a single word directed at me, my brother had continued becoming a person. It sounds obvious written down. Of course, he continued. People do not stop existing because you have hurt them. But grief has a particular arrogance to it. I had been so inside my own guilt that I had unconsciously imagined Miles as frozen, as waiting, somehow, for resolution. The farmer's market image shook that loose. He was not frozen. He was living. He was living without me in it. That was the first time the loss felt real, in a way my guilt had been insulating me from. 2 years after the divorce, my mother was diagnosed with early-stage breast cancer. It was caught early and the prognosis was good, but the word cancer does something to a family. Even when the outcome is likely to be manageable. It contracts things. It makes the distances feel more important. Miles came to her first appointment with her oncologist. I was there too. We sat in the same waiting room, and he nodded when he saw me. And I nodded back, and we both sat down on opposite sides of the room. We did not speak. We listened to the doctor together from opposite corners of that small office. And when the appointment ended and my mother was talking to the nurse about scheduling, Miles and I stood briefly side by side in the hallway. He said, "She's going to be okay." I said, "I think so," that was all. He walked out. I stood there for a second longer than I needed to before following. I don't know what I expected from those 4 words. Not forgiveness. Not reunion. Just something. And there had been something. Not warmth but acknowledgement. The faintest signal that we were still, in some reduced and damaged way, related. My mother's treatment went well. She completed it over several months and came out the other side tired but intact. During that period, kissed. Miles and I developed a kind of parallel presence in her life. We would both show up to help with things she needed, but rarely at the same time. She told me once carefully that Miles had asked about me. She did not tell me what he had asked. I did not push. Olive turned 5. Then 6. On her birthdays, I sent a card through my mother, because I did not have Miles's new address and I was not going to ask for it. My mother would deliver the card, and later tell me that Olive had opened it, and said thank you, or that she had recognized my name, or once that she had asked if I was the uncle who had the yellow dog. I do have a yellow dog. A golden retriever named Biscuit. Olive had met him twice before everything fell apart. The fact that she remembered the dog and not the breach, not the 8 months, not the adult failures that had remade her life, was something I held onto. Not as proof of anything, just as something small and real. 3 years after the divorce, I wrote Miles a letter. Not an email. A letter, handwritten, on paper I bought, specifically because I wanted the act of writing it to cost me something. I had tried drafting it in my head for months, and each time I either over-explained or under-delivered. When I finally sat down to write it, made myself a rule. I was not allowed to explain my reasoning. I was not allowed to say what I had been afraid of. I was not allowed to use the word complicated. I was only allowed to say what was true. What I wrote was this. Miles. I knew something was wrong for 8 months and I did not tell you. I told myself I was waiting for the right time or more certainty, or some version of the situation that would make the telling easier. None of those things were real. I was protecting myself from a conversation I did not want to have. You deserved a brother who put your well-being ahead of his own discomfort. I was not that brother when it mattered most. I am sorry. I am not asking for anything from you. I just needed you to have this in writing from me, your brother. I mailed it to my mother's house and asked her to pass it along. 3 weeks went by, then a month. I tried not to check my phone too often. I mostly failed. 6 weeks after I mailed the letter, a response arrived at my house. Miles's handwriting on the envelope. I recognized it from years of birthday cards and notes left on the fridge at our parents' house growing up. I sat down before I opened it. He had written, I read your letter. I have read it more than once. I believe you mean what you said. What I want you to understand is that the 8 months were not the only thing. The 8 months were the thing I could name. What I could not name for a long time was the feeling, going back, Snuls, that you were someone who would always find a way to land safely, even when the people around you did not. I don't think you are a bad person. I think you have always assumed that being good enough was good enough. Wasn't it? Not for me. I need more time, Miles. I read the letter standing in my kitchen. Then I sat down and read it again. Then I folded it and put it in the drawer, where I keep things I need to return to. He was right. I had always assumed that being good enough was good enough. I had spent my entire adult life adjacent to integrity, close enough to feel like I was there but not always fully inside it. I had been a decent person in low-stakes moments, and I had failed in the one moment that required something more. My wife, whose name is June, read the letter when I showed it to her. She was quiet for a long time after. Then she said, "Do you know what he means about always landing safely?" I said yes. She looked at me. "Then you know what you need to work on." June has a way of saying the true thing without drama. I have always been grateful for that. In those months, I was especially grateful. I started seeing a therapist in the spring, not because anyone asked me to, but because I realized I had been replaying the 8 months in a loop, without ever getting anywhere new. I needed someone to help me move through it, rather than around it. The therapist, a quiet man in his 50s whose office smelled like cedar, asked me early on what I was most afraid of. I said I was afraid Miles would never forgive me. He said, "That's about you. What are you most afraid of for your brother?" That reframe sat with me for weeks. What I was most afraid of for my brother was that he would carry the weight of that betrayal forward into his life, that it would make him smaller, that it would make him trust less, and offer less, and keep more of himself protected from the people who might deserve it. When I said that out loud in the therapist's office, I realized it was the first time I had thought about Miles without my own guilt as the center of the thought. The therapist said, "From what you've told me, it sounds like your brother is doing the work of not letting that happen." Seringemuld. He was right. Miles was doing exactly that. The running, the quiet apartment near the park, the joint custody schedule that he kept with total consistency. He had been doing the work while I was still composing apologies. 4 years after the divorce, Miles called me. I was at the hardware store, of all places, buying weather stripping for our back door. My phone rang, and his name came up, and I stood in the middle of an aisle, holding a package of foam tape like it was something fragile. I answered. He said, "Hey." I said, "Hey." There was a pause that lasted long enough for me to abandon any pretense of composure. He said, "Olive has a school thing next Saturday. A science fair. She asked if you and June would come." I held the foam tape. I did not speak for a second. "She asked?" I said. "She did." I felt something in my chest that I cannot describe precisely. Not relief exactly. Something slower than relief. Like a tide going out after years of the water being too high. I said, "We'd love to come." Miles cleared his throat. "There are some things I need to say first." I said. "Okay. I am not where I need to be with you yet. I want to be honest about that. But Olive knows you are her uncle. She knows you have the yellow dog. She asked about you on her own, without me bringing it up, and I made a decision that her relationship with you is separate from my relationship with you." He paused. "I'm not ready for what we were, but I don't want to be the reason she loses people she doesn't have to lose." I said, "I understand. If something happens that feels like too much, I'll say so and we'll leave. That's fair." And he stopped. I waited. "Don't bring Kyle up, ever, to me or to her." "I won't." Another pause. Then he said, "Okay, Saturday 10 o'clock, Jefferson Elementary." I knew where it was. I had been near it a dozen times and never let myself go in. The science fair was held in the gymnasium. Round tables, poster boards, the particular smell of glue and crayons that lives in elementary schools. June wore her blue cardigan because Olive had told me once, years ago, that blue was her favorite color. I don't know if that was still true. But I wanted to be someone who remembered small things. We arrived a few minutes early. Miles was already there, standing near Olive's table. He was taller than I remembered, or maybe I had just forgotten the specifics of him. He had a beard now. He looked like a person who had gotten enough sleep. Beside him was a woman I had not met. She had a steady, easy way of standing that made me think she was someone who did not startle easily. She introduced herself as Portia. She was a physical therapist. She shook my hand and then June's hand, and then moved slightly aside to give Miles space to manage whatever the moment was going to be. Miles and I did not hug. We shook hands. It was firm, longer than strictly necessary. Olive came running over a moment later, flushed from having explained her project to 3 sets of parents in a row. She was 7 now. She had Miles's coloring, and Stella's nose, and her own particular way of moving. Quick and slightly sideways, like she was always cutting the corner off a turn. She stopped in front of me. "You have the yellow dog," she said. "His name is Biscuit," I said. She considered this with great seriousness. "That's a food name." "It is. He should come to things," she said. And then immediately turned to June and asked if she was the one who made the cookies Miles had brought home once. June said yes, those had been her cookies. Olive said, "They were good," with the gravity of a restaurant critic, and then took June's hand and pulled her toward the project table to explain the water filtration experiment she had built out of a 2-liter bottle and gravel and sand. I stood beside Miles watching them. He said, "She's been planning what to say to you for 2 days." I did not trust my voice, so I did not use it for a moment. Then I said, "I missed her." Miles looked at me. "I know." We stood there while Olive explained the water cycle to June with complete authority, pointing at labeled diagrams with a marker as her pointer. Miles said quietly, "I'm not saying everything is fixed, I know, I'm saying, I'm tired of Olive not having an uncle." I looked at him. "Thank you." He looked away. "Don't thank me. Just don't make me regret it." "I won't." He nodded once, the way men nod when they are settling something that does not require more words. Portia brought coffee from a table near the entrance and handed one to Miles and raised an eyebrow at me. I said yes thank you. The coffee was weak gymnasium coffee in a paper cup. It was the best cup of coffee I had in years. After the fair we walked to a diner 2 blocks away. The 5 of us, plus Portia. Olive ordered a stack of blueberry pancakes. And talked about her teacher and a book she was reading about ocean animals and whether Biscuit could swim. The conversation was ordinary, in a way that felt extraordinary to me because it was ordinary. When the check came, Miles and I both reached for it at the same time. We looked at each other. He pulled his hand back. I paid. Outside on the sidewalk, Olive hugged June first, then me. It was the kind of hug children give when they have not been told yet to be careful with hugs. Full weight, both arms, face pressed against your side. I put my hand on the back of her head and held on for exactly as long as she did. When she pulled away she said, "Tell Biscuit I said hi." I said I would. Miles and I stood on the sidewalk while Portia walked ahead with Olive. He said, "Same time next month. She has a piano recital." I said, "We'll be there." He looked at me for a moment. There was something in his face I could not read fully. Not forgiveness, not yet. Something before forgiveness. A door not open but unlocked. He said, "You should have told me, man. I know. I needed you. You were the one person who could have." He stopped. Shook his head. "Doesn't matter now, it matters." He looked at the sidewalk. "Yeah." Then he looked up. "But it can't be the only thing that matters." He put his hand briefly on my shoulder. One firm press, then gone. Then he walked toward Portia and Olive, who had stopped to look at something in a store window. June slipped her hand into mine as we watched them. She said, "How do you feel?" I thought about it, like I don't deserve this. She squeezed my hand. "That might be exactly why he gave it to you." We stood there until Miles's family turned the corner and disappeared. The afternoon was bright and cool the way Knoxville afternoons get in early October. That particular light that makes everything look a little more like itself. I have not stopped carrying what I did. I do not think I am supposed to. The 8 months are not something I get to put down and walk away from. They are part of what I am now. Part of the accounting of who I was when it mattered and what I chose. But Miles let his daughter tell me about ocean animals. He let her hug me on a sidewalk. He let me pay for blueberry pancakes, while she asked whether dogs are allowed to swim in rivers. He did not owe me any of that. My brother is not a man who gives things he does not mean. So when he gives something, I try to receive it without making it about what I still want. Because I have learned, finally the hard way, that love without accountability is just convenience. And my brother has never been convenient. He has only ever been real. If you are someone who knows a secret that belongs to your brother, your sister, your friend, the person who trusted you first, do not wait for the perfect moment. The perfect moment is always right now. Because the silence you keep to protect yourself is the same silence that will hollow out, something you cannot rebuild from the outside. I know this, because I kept that silence for 8 months. And my brother spent the next 4 years teaching me, without ever saying it directly, what it actually means to be a person worth trusting. I am still learning. I think I will be for a long time. That might be exactly how it should be.